glad to welcome Ken Wood to the show. First time with us. Ken is a noted bail attorney, a board member of the Professional Bondsmen of Texas, and he is somebody we call because he really is an expert on criminality, things about lawlessness that all of us have been concerned about. It's just amazing how much lawlessness has been normalized across the United States over the last, 10 or 12 years. And we're living in the aftermath of all of that has happened. And we, the people, are the ones that are paying the price. Mr. Wood, thank you for being here with us today. And I'm not going to try to guide you through this because I'm looking for experts to speak to our people. We have a whole lot of very engaged people in our political process that listen to this show. And we're all running around screaming into the air because we can't get a handle on how to stop the criminality in the United States. Can you give us a little of your background and tell us what we're going to get into today?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me on your show. My last name is Good, not Wood, and this is it's not a common mistake, but it's a mistake that people make. So it's not out of the norm for some reason.
I apologize.
I probably prefer being called Wood than Good because I've been made fun of for being goody two-shoes for so many years. But I graduated from law school in 1989. I feel very old at 63, although I'm in good health. But I started out practicing law representing doctors and hospitals when they got sued. But I developed this practice of representing, insurance companies and bondsmen on bail issues. And I was asked to attend a federal hearing on a bail case, and I just became very concerned that the judge was going in the wrong direction. She was making the wrong ruling, and I came out and set out the alarms because I've always had an interest in the legal issues. I have an appellate. I used to do appellate practice where I'd go to the courts of appeals, Supreme Court of Texas, the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals, and argue cases. And so I like the legal type issues. And so I came out setting the alarm, and that was an important case. And all these years later, the Fifth Circuit ultimately ruled that case should have never been filed in federal court. That judge was reversed 7, 8, 9 times. So I think I was proven correct. But the damage that's been done to the criminal justice system in the interim, and I think a large part of it is through misrepresentation, because we've been told so many times, don't listen to law enforcement. It's almost like, we teach in colleges and criminology classes how to fight crime. And for the last so many years, we've been told, disregard all that. We have a better path. And I think what we're learning now is the better path was all a PR campaign, and it was a complete failure, and they still won't admit it.
Well, there's a lot of that. I don't need to tell you this, but a lot of that. And one reason we were excited to have you on the show is because people that listen to us, most of us average Americans, we're living in that world that you live in professionally. And as you just pointed out, there's been a lot of changes in our criminal justice system that people have made, not the people of the United States, but bureaucrats have made, changing the lives of millions of Americans. And we don't know what to do about it.
Well, but I think that, I think the pendulum is starting to swing. I think we're in the right direction. I think we're making the same mistakes that we made in the 60s. In the 60s, we felt safer, so we were more forgiving on our criminal laws. As a result, crime started to increase. When it did, we had this fight between the political ideas of the different spectrums, and one side refused to participate in addressing what those harms were, and so we ended up having a backlash. I was predicting 2 years ago that we would have a backlash to rising crime. It did not happen, and I think it was because the Supreme Court had issued its abortion ruling, and that overcame the backlash. And so the election that we're having right now, I think the backlash was in full display because I think it's so hand in hand with the immigration issues. But when you've got people or DA saying, I'm no longer going to prosecute crime under $950, that's the state of that's LA County. And crime is increasing as a result, and businesses are closing down, and commercial property values are going through the basement, and they won't even admit there's a problem. Well, that's the reason why the electorate just stepped in, and that district attorney was defeated by over 20 points. And the concept of we're not going to prosecute crime under $950 for theft has been rolled back with one of the propositions in the November election. So we see things that are changing, and these DAs that were elected on a soft on crime policy are being replaced by law and order DAs. So we have this righting of the ship. It's just that we still have so much more to do, because we see so much misrepresentation that's been taking place. And I think it has been outright misrepresentation, because when you look at the crime statistics from the FBI, which has been the basis of all their arguments for the last 2 or 3 years, that crime is not going up. It's just a perception issue. And then suddenly, a month before the election, the FBI changes them to show that crime is going up. When that happened, I said Trump's going to win, because the FBI would have changed those statistics if they didn't think he was going. If they thought he was going to lose.
3 months before that was finally revealed, we watched the FBI monthly criminal statistics throughout each year, and it just didn't seem, for 3 months we were looking. We reported here on this show multiple times. The numbers just seem really strange. I have a close friend, lives right here in North Louisiana, former FBI field director, good Christian man, and I reached out to him, and he made one phone call, and he called me back and said, guess what happened? The FBI went to a brand new reporting system where every precinct for police across the nation sends monthly their criminal activity to the FBI. And the problem was, the FBI changed it at headquarters, but the field offices in cities and towns and even little rural areas did not upgrade to that brand new software program. So what happened is, when they started, they being the Democrats at the national level, starting selling the fact that crime is down across the nation, the FBI says so, they didn't bother to tell anybody that the FBI was not getting current numbers. And it was tens of thousands.
You are so correct. You are so correct. I mean, in fact, I had the same impression. There's got to be something wrong with this. And so in October, probably 10 days before this change was discovered, I had an article published on the Attorney at Law magazine saying we should be questioning the accuracy of the FBI statistics for these reasons. And what you just got through talking about is the first thing in my article. And I mean, my article was published at the Attorney at Law magazine online in October. 10 days later, it was discovered that the FBI statistics had changed. I mean, I was just lucky on timing, but I was raising the very questions that you're pointing out. And at the time, there were social scientists saying these are not accurate, but for the exact reason you stated. But that didn't prevent, a national party say that, well, crime's not going up. Just look at the crime statistics. That everybody, all the people on the inside knew were incomplete and not accurate.
Ken, that illustrates, in my opinion, that illustrates the problem that everyday Americans, people out in the heatherlands, people that aren't in politics, maybe not be living in big cities, or may not have big jobs or be in politics, just everyday Americans that are living their lives the normal way. You said you're 60 what? How old are you?
I'm 63, fixed to be 64.
I'm 71. I have grandchildren. I now have one great-granddaughter, and I look at the landscape of the safety across the United States in the context of my grandchildren and now a great-granddaughter.
Yeah.
I don't want them to face all of this fear and the lying and gross misrepresentation of facts that have been coming out of our government, various agencies in our government. And when we started asking questions over the last 7, 8, 9 years about these things that just seem to not smell right, we were told, sit down and shut up. We're the experts. We'll tell you what you need to know, and you got to trust us. Well, when the places that are supposed to take care of us, all of our law enforcement agencies, when they take that approach, it really foments fear across the stage of the nation for people, average American people that don't have the ability to go out and dig. You've got resources. We have resources. And of course, you're doing the same thing that we are, but you're an expert. We're just somebody that's looking in and watching what you guys are doing and finding out. It's becoming more and more scary for everyday Americans because we just simply don't know and feel like we can't trust the information that we're getting out of our government.
Well, and the truth is we're in a period on criminal justice reform that you can't because it's a absolutely coordinated strategy where they're misrepresenting crime statistics. I've done a podcast talking about sacrificing public safety one district attorney at a time, and I go through all the different things. But from recruiting soft on crime district attorney candidates to then once they're elected, inviting them to seminars where they'll be told, we got you elected, quid pro quo, here's what we want from you. And it's these soft on crime policies. And then they have other groups that do quote unquote studies that support being soft on crime, that it will not make us less safe. And then they have their last set of groups that do, the PR to sell it to the public. The week after the FBI statistics came updated and we found out crime was going up just like we knew, one of these groups issued a study a week later saying, that's not bail reform and criminal justice reform has not caused crime to increase. So they've immediately responded to say it's not them to protect themselves, to try to save the election. It's at the point where if you look at any statistics that are outside law enforcement, which historically is where we get our statistics on crime, you should disregard them and discount them. They may be packaged up in with a pretty bow, but I've decided they're all lies. I did a debate with someone from a national law firm that files all these lawsuits, and she was arguing that jails are cages and that she was relying upon the FBI statistics. And I will say, God rest her soul, because she was on the DC plane that was in the crash with a helicopter, and she passed away in the last week. But what she was quoting, I discovered after that was the national policy for criminal justice reform of that party. And so I think they have outsourced it to those groups. They bought into it thinking it was correct. They didn't realize it's all smoke and mirrors. It's all lies. And the reason why I think is they want to move those dollars from law enforcement, which is the largest budget item for a county, and they want to move it to their social programs. And they didn't change their strategy when it was a complete failure. That's why they're getting such a backlash.
I think we're at a strategic crossroad as a nation, and I think you probably agree with me. We're in the South. You're in Texas. I'm in Louisiana. I'm a native Texan, but I've been in Louisiana for most of my life. And your state is known as one of the number one law enforcement states of all 50. Louisiana, not so much, and our numbers are pretty much dragged down because of New Orleans and Baton Rouge. But up in Northwest Louisiana, where I am, we see things differently than people in Dallas, Fort Worth, and Houston, and other big cities around the nation. But we're all Americans. And our government, they tell us all the time when they're running for office, the number one thing any politician's got to do is make sure the American people are safe. But that's not happening anymore. The people that have the sole authority to implement and maintain the processes that will make Americans feel safe everywhere we go, that doesn't fit a political narrative. So they may say we're doing that, but they're not doing it. And crime, I've never seen crime at this level in my life across the nation. Have you?
No, I mean, I was born in 1961, and I do think, though, from looking at history, we're repeating the same mistakes that were made in the early 60s. But I mean, this is a really bad time, and it's really, I mean, let's give them a good intent, or they started with a good intent when they proposed these policies. I don't think that can be true, but let's give them that when they started. They started in one-party strongholds in our urban areas. And if we say they had a good intent, they thought, we'll start here and we'll be so successful we can grow it out to the conservative areas. But if that was true, when it was a complete failure, they would have acknowledged that and tried something different. They didn't. And so they didn't have a good intent, and they still don't to this day. But what changed is we had an election in November. And not only do we have this massive change with the president, we have all these things that are suddenly coming out. And, the president is fighting to get rid of gangs in our urban cities. If he has any success at all in lowering crime in our urban cities, the backlash that one party is going to have in the next election is just going to get worse and worse, because the backlash we should have had 2 years ago didn't happen because it was covered by lies, really, I think.
I got to agree with you totally. And let me tell our audience this. Mr. Good and I have never spoken on the phone. He may have listened to the show or know a little bit about it, but I don't know anything but just the basics about him. But I do know, and it's kind of horrible that I have to say this because of what I'm going to say it for, because I read his background, and I know where he went to school, I know where he lives, and I know a little bit about him, and he probably can feel the same way about me. We can judge based upon things that really don't come from knowing the substance of each other, but based upon just a few sentences that we say to other people. We know there are things that are really wrong in the nation, but knowing about something is one thing. Doing something about it is something totally different. And you and I grew up at the beginning of our lives. I was born in 1953. At the beginning of my cognizance of things around me, I just assumed law enforcement was going to take care of me. And they always did up into a certain part. There's always been criminality, and sadly there will always be criminality. But just like our kids learn how to do right, because when they do wrong, they're held accountable for doing wrong, and they learn from that. But you and I now have lived our lives. We've morphed into a type of life where everything seems to be okay, at least to some people, and therefore the dismissal of accountability across the board is destroying the fundamental structure of our nation, which is fundamentally those in power over us politically. Their number one job is to make sure we're safe. And of course, we've got a guy back in the White House now that he showed us through his 4 years being there before. We can pretty much believe when he says he's going to do something, he's going to do it. And he's committed to this. I'm not going to get into politics with you, and I'm not going to ask you anything about your politics, but I think I got a glimpse. But nevertheless, the one thing that was different when he ran the first time, Trump, he was like, during his campaign, pretty much every politician that runs for office. If you elect me, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. I'm going to take care of this. They all tell us that. The one difference was when he was elected, in his 4 years, his first 4 years, he did every one of those things that he promised when he was campaigning. The only things he didn't do were the ones that he had to have Congress on board to get them done. I've never seen that from any previous president in my lifetime, and I disagree.
Look, my favorite meme that's come out of after Trump was elected for a second term is there's a meme that said during Trump's first term he was playing politics and he wasn't comfortable with it, Now with his second term, he's doing exactly what he knows. He's taken over a bankrupt company, and that's his greatest strength. I think if the Democrats had did not play all the funny games they did, and he had been reelected, he would have been faced with a Democrat House and maybe a Democrat Senate. He would not have gotten much done. He may have even been impeached one more time. Now he's there with a Republican Senate and currently a Republican House, and he also learned greatly from his first term. I think people are shocked at how smart he is and how he is doing all these things. I mean, just bam, bam, bam. And it's because, I mean, it's like when I went to law school, I usually do well after the first test. Well, the first test is at the end of the first semester. So at the end of the first semester, I was in the middle of the class. Well, the second semester, I was top 10%. So I wished I'd had my first test in the middle of the first semester instead of the end. He's the same freaking way. He is probably one of the smartest persons, but he's also has common sense. And I agree with you. When he says he's going to do something, you better take it to the bank. But he's also a great negotiator. And when he says we're going to take over the Gaza Strip and make it into a resort town, I mean, people take him at his word and freak out. And I think the smart people go, he has just made his opening salvo for negotiations to get people to come to a realization that they need to find a solution, or they're not going to be living where they consider home. And that's what he does on so many of the things. George Bush, the second George Bush, was the best at that. He would start negotiations, but on a simpler level. He would start negotiations asking for twice what he wanted, and at the end, he'd settle for half. Well, that was what he wanted in the first place. I think Trump is really kind of doing something similar to that, but he's a much smarter man. He's doing it on a much grander level. And the results we're seeing, I think somebody said he's done more in the first 2 weeks, which can you believe it's been 2 weeks, than the last administration did in 4 years. I think in some ways that's absolutely correct.
I want to ask your permission about something. I'd like to spend the next 10 or 15 minutes with you. I want to ask you some questions about things that are happening now. Maybe they don't include the specifics about your background, but obviously you're an American, you're an adult. Do you have a family?
Oh, yes. Yeah, absolutely. I'm married to another attorney, and I have 2 daughters.
Well, God bless you for being married to a second attorney in the household.
Yeah, she's much smarter than me.
Hey, as long as you believe that, y'all are going to be okay. But this stuff that has come out, and I'm like you, I can't believe I've been a Trump fan. I've been a businessman, an entrepreneur my entire life. I've built a big corporation. I know what it takes from that perspective to be able to be successful. And there are so many moving parts. Most people that don't understand business from being in it and being successful, and probably even more importantly, failing, at least in part when you were doing it, you don't know what average Americans are dealing with. He speaks to the average American people. Now, let me ask you this question. Elon Musk, he's being pilloried by everybody on the left. They're all screaming that Donald Trump did not have authority to hire Elon Musk. Nobody elected Elon Musk president. They're trying. Maxine Waters, I played a soundbite. In fact, when you called the first time and I couldn't pick up, I was in that soundbite with her, and she made all kind of allegations about Trump needs to be impeached again. Elon Musk needs to go to jail. They can't do this, yada, yada, yada. You know the mantra. But
yes,
I've never seen Democrats go this crazy so quickly, getting out in the streets literally with bullhorns and screaming and hollering and threatening Donald Trump and Elon Musk. And of course, the exposure the last 48 hours about this thing with USAID and the billions of dollars that Democrats have been hiding for decades in USA, it just became a slush fund for bureaucrats in Washington, D.C. and the controlling party. And they're going nuts, and they're fomenting violence against the sitting president and Elon Musk. Have you seen anything like this happen at this level in your political lifetime since you've been cognizant of politics? I've never seen anything like this.
Well, there's some things that are close. During Trump's first term in office, we had similar things by Maxine Waters, where she was out saying, if you see a Republican out at a restaurant, you get in their face, you run them out of the restaurant. And you remember we had an incident with Trump's spokesperson going to a restaurant and having something happen to her. So but I will say it's taken them 2 weeks. So I think the shock and awe of what's happened for the last couple of weeks they didn't know how to respond. They have lost the narrative because the public's in line and in support of what Trump is doing by cutting spending. So this is really pulling. They've gotten over their shock. They're now in the anger phase. They're pulling out exactly what they did at the start of this Trump's first term, and that has a strategy. It's a get in your face. Anybody that is willing to work with Trump, this is what we will do to you. So it's intended to scare off anyone from wanting or being willing to work with a Republican administration. When I've been talking to groups for the last months, maybe 6 months before this last election, I'm like, we have all these identity politics, but both parties have been historically law and order. We have to bring one party back to be law and order. And so the only way we can do that is disregard identity politics, vote law and order, and that will bring them back to the fold. I'm not sure they've gotten the message. They're going to have to go through one more election, and they're going off the deep end on craziness. If you've watched the videos when they elected their most recent DNC chair. So I think they've got to go through one more election because the leaders right now are saying, we just weren't liberal enough. If we were more liberal, we would have won this election. You and I know that would have been catastrophic. If Biden had stayed in the race, there's reports that Trump was on track to win over 400 electoral votes. They switched to Harris. They saved 80 electoral votes. They still lost, but they saved 80 electoral votes, which means down ballot races were saved. They're going to go back, and if they don't right course, the next national election, they're going to elect a far left candidate, and it's going to be an absolute massacre, I believe.
I'm going to ask you a question, and this is a father to a father. What ages are your children?
My oldest is 25. My youngest is 19. But when she was 5, she had a bone marrow transplant. So we are a very close family as a result of it. Very protective of each other, I'm a father of girls. So I have girls because I am so competitive. If I had boys, we probably wouldn't be talking because I would have been on the sidelines yelling at all the referees, but instead I was at all the dance recitals.
I got you. I've got 2 daughters, and I've lived through the same thing you're just talking about there. Our second daughter had really bad breast cancer, and we lived through that. I know what it's like when it's a child and we go through that kind of stuff. So we kind of relate on that level. Here's what I want to ask you. And the reason I'm asking you is because my kids are older than yours, and they started in a different era. They started while you and I were growing up, but I was a little ahead of you, but they did not see any of this insanity that's playing out on our social stages around the nation that your children are now. Thankfully, I'm sure your children are old enough and they got the upbringing by you and your wife about the honesty and the important things, and we gave them what they needed, our kids, and I'm sure you did too, the necessary things to make good decisions with, having real facts to use in that way. But do you think today's generation, the ones that are in high school, as an example, do you think we'll have any kind of chance to be able to erase some of this stuff that's been tattooed on their brains by social media and all of the crazy stuff that's going on in the nation around them. Can we salvage this?
Okay. I have said for a while, I'm very hopeful in criminal justice reform because what we're doing right now is not sustainable. So I'm always hopeful that I've always been optimistic that things would be righted. And the same thing with our children and families. I mean, we hear whatever we want from society, but the biggest influence on our children is us as a parent. I mean, I've had the same issues. I've gone through these things where your daughter comes home from school and she's telling you about climate change, and you're like, what? And you're trying to bring her back to a little bit of a reality instead of being this craziness. And they initially don't, they're just telling you you're wrong. So you just have to be consistent. But you know what? I mean, my oldest daughter, she ended up being an intern in the White House during Trump's first term. She was one of 3 interns every day for a semester in the West Wing of the White House. And she got to experience and see Trump and how he was treated during his first term and see how intelligent he is, and his daughter. I mean, we still hear to this day from our daughter how smart and intelligent that Trump's daughter was, and how what you see on TV is the real man, the real person. I mean, so life experiences will bring them back, and just being consistent and being supportive, you will. I mean, just like we were shocked that of the things that our children do and how they just make you proud every day. They'll listen to you. You're the biggest influence of your children. You just have to be supportive and just be consistent.
I want to read this to you. Senator Chris Murphy, Democrat from Connecticut, said this last night. Now remember, he's a Democrat, but he's a U.S. Senator. Quote, "So I just think there's a tipping point at which you can't get your democracy back. And I see all of these very purposeful lines of effort that the Trump administration and Elon Musk are taking. And I think we just have to be right now at this moment on in red alert mode. And what I see is the normalization of violence. I don't think you can you can underestimate how impactful it is when you're thinking about going out to a protest and you might get beat up by somebody who has immunity of violence in Trump's name." And then he said this one thing, and I want to get your thoughts. "I don't think you can underestimate the impact of what's happening in our media, where major platforms are either under the direct control or influence of the administration. And then what you're seeing is an attempt to capture the funding streams of the government so that Elon Musk or Donald Trump can turn off your grant payment to your elementary school if it doesn't pledge loyalty to Donald Trump's political positions, or your mom's Social Security check if she goes online and says something critical of Elon Musk or Trump. I mean, I just think if we don't stop this very soon, it is going to be hard to mount a credible political opposition in the not-so-distant future." Your thoughts about what he said?
Trump has always been Hitler.
Yeah.
According to one party. Trump has always been a threat to democracy, according to one party. And I think what we've learned in the last election and what we're learning in the last 2 weeks is that President Trump, is not a threat to democracy. He's a threat to the Democrat Party and all the things that they have done and have been doing that the public would not have supported if they knew it was happening. So when you hear them saying, "Oh, Trump's a threat to democracy," I think all you got to do is change it to say Trump's a threat to our party, and everything goes, "Oh, it's all completely clear what's going on." They don't want that to change, but that's not democracy in our country. That's what one party has been doing, and I'll just say it again: we would have had a backlash 2 years ago on crime, but for crime's not going up, a denial. And then what did we have this time? The election was only as close as it was because they said, we've changed our policy on immigration and we've been deporting. taking credit for what Texas has been doing, and they haven't been doing anything. And so they realized that, and they realize to this day that they have to appear to be certain things, even when they know once they're elected they can't be that way. The problem going forward for them is that's what Biden ran on. He ran as a moderate and he ruled as a far left. So how can anyone run as a moderate again for a party that has a history of lying to the public? I mean, I would just be saying, are you lying? I mean, how can we believe you when we've already heard that? And once you're elected, all these things take place. And I don't even think they'll nominate a moderate because I think the Obama coalition is gone. And with Biden and Harris's defeat, that coalition is gone. And they had to manipulate the system to put up Biden. They had to manipulate even worse to get Harris, to get a semblance of a moderate. There will be no semblance of a moderate in the next national election on the current trajectory of that party. And so we're going to have a clear thing to vote on. And so I think that Trump is not a threat to democracy. He's a threat to the Democrat Party and the shenanigans that they've been playing. And of course they're freaking out because they know what's coming. It's going to, the backlash that should have happened 2 years ago has the potential to be huge. And we're going to go back to the Nixon days where a Democrat can't win a national election, but they win local elections. That's where this could go if they don't right their ship. And I don't see anything showing that they're going to right their ship.
Wow. Ken Good with us this morning. An amazing man. I want to tell you, I really appreciate you sharing your heart like you have. And I want to tell you this, and when we finish, don't hang up. And I need to touch base with you just for a second. But you're welcome here anytime you want to come back. Something hot in the news. I think you know pretty much who we're about. We have people, just so you know this, we have audiences in 37 different countries. We have a huge crowd that has joined us from Sweden. We have a big crowd from Australia and New Zealand. And of course, we have people all over Canada, the United States, and Mexico. So your message, just the little bit of time you had to share with us today, it resonates with a whole lot of people that are just like us. We've got our noses to the ground and we're looking for truth. And we want to find the truth, and we want people governing us that are willing to take the truth and throw away their personal ideologies and just support the rule of law and keep us safe. People like you are helping make that happen, and I appreciate you joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Ken Good, folks. Really good word.